Hey, I'm a psychiatrist, and over the past few years, I have noticed a connecting pattern with a couple patients in my practice. Actually, even my personal life, to be quite honest. For example, I recently met someone who had been fired from 3 jobs in 2 years. Every romantic relationship ended badly. Friends had stopped calling, and they were generally convinced that the world was absolutely against them. Basically, everyone else was the problem. So, we dug deeper. You see, it turns out that they had what we call low emotional intelligence. And this wasn't about being a bad person. This was more about missing critical skills for understanding emotions, both your own and other people's. And these are skills that can absolutely be learned. Now, this is huge for a lot of people because your emotional intelligence, also known as your EQ, can matter way more than your IQ when it comes to life success, relationships, career, mental health, all of it. But most people have no idea what low EQ actually looks like until it costs them. So today I'm breaking down 5 signs of low emotional intelligence that you cannot afford to miss. Now, if you're new here, welcome to Mental Wealth MD. I'm Dr. J, and I'm a medical doctor specializing in psychiatry, and my sole goal in this channel is to make mental health make sense for you. Now, our first sign is an inability to name their emotions. Now, this is something I see constantly in my practice, and that is folks who struggle to identify or name what they're feeling beyond good or bad. Think about someone who asks, "How are you feeling right now?" And then they pause and they say, "Fine," or "Not great," or "I don't know." And that's it. No further description, no nuance. This is called a limited emotional vocabulary, and it's a massive red flag for low EQ. For example, let's say someone just had a heated argument with your partner, and you ask them how they're feeling, and they say bad. But are you hurt? Are you angry? Are you disappointed? Are you betrayed? Are you overwhelmed? You see, each of these emotions point to a different underlying need and related solution. Now, if you can't name the emotion, you often can't process it or communicate it effectively, which leads to difficulty in solving the underlying problem driving the said emotion. Research also shows that emotional granularity, which is basically your ability to make fine distinctions between emotions, this predicts better mental health outcomes. So for example, people who can say, "I'm feeling anxious and a little resentful," do better than people who say, "I feel bad." Now, one way I describe this in real life is that when we can feel our emotions, we're basically operating blind, where we know something is wrong, but we just can't figure out what or why. So oftentimes we stay stuck. Okay, our second sign is explosive reactions to small things. This is usually caused by poor emotional regulation, which then shows up as explosive reactions to minor frustrations. And this is the person who loses it in traffic. I mean, they scream at the barista who got your order wrong, they throw out your phone when an app crashes. Their emotion usually goes from 0 to 100 in seconds. There are no pauses, no filter. Now, what's happening here is a breakdown in the space between feeling and action. You see, emotional intelligence includes the ability to feel something intensely and still choose how you respond. Low EQ means that space collapses. So when you feel anger, you act on anger immediately. I want you to picture this. Someone's driving and a car cuts them off. Now they feel a surge of rage. You see, in high EQ, they notice this feeling, they take a breath, maybe mutter something under their breath and keep driving. Low EQ, they're honking, they're tailgating, they're screaming, maybe even following the person, all because someone changed lanes and cut them off. And the stakes get higher in relationships. So someone with low EQ might say devastating things in an argument, things they can't take back, because in that moment, the emotion completely hijacked your brain. Our third sign is they completely miss social cues, which is basically an inability to read the room. This person keeps talking when everyone else has checked out. They don't notice when someone's uncomfortable or upset. They make jokes at the wrong time, and they share way too much personal information with people they just met. And best or worst part is they have no idea that any of this is happening. For simplicity, let's say you're at a work meeting and someone shares an idea. Another person's body language may shift, arms are crossed, they're looking down, their facial expression tightens. Most people pick up on that immediately, like, oh, they're not happy about this. But someone with a low EQ, they don't see it. They keep pushing the idea, wondering why the other person suddenly seems cold. Now, really quickly, here's an important distinction, and that relates to autism. You see, autistic people usually struggle with reading social cues because of differences in how they process social information. That's a neurodevelopmental difference. Low EQ, on the other hand, is about not having developed or practiced those skills. It can also largely improve with awareness and effort. See, missing social cues creates this pattern where someone genuinely doesn't understand why relationships keep going wrong. And in many cases, they're genuinely confused. They didn't mean to offend anyone, but they also can see what they're doing, just pushing people away. For our fourth sign, everything feels like a personal attack. And this is usually based on hypersensitivity to feedback combined with immediate defensiveness. This is the person who cannot hear constructive criticism without feeling attacked. You know, their boss says, hey, this report needs more detail in section 3, and they hear you are incompetent. Their partner says, hey, I felt hurt when you canceled our plans, and they hear you're a terrible person. Everything gets filtered through this lens of judgment and threat. So instead of listening and learning, they defend, explain, and blame. The feedback never lands because they're really too busy protecting themselves. Okay, let's work through a scenario. Someone's at a performance review and the manager says, you've been doing solid work. One area for growth is responding to emails more quickly. Some clients have mentioned delays. An example of a high EQ response, thanks for letting me know. I didn't realize that was an issue. Let me work on that. On the other hand, a low EQ response might sound like, well, I've been swamped. No one else responds faster. Actually, Sarah takes days to respond and no one says anything to her. I don't think that's fair. You see that shift? Instead of receiving the feedback, they deflected, compared themselves to others, and made it about fairness. The actual issue of a slow email never got addressed. This pattern destroys relationships because people just stop giving feedback and they just walk away. It's kind of sad. Our fifth sign is a trail and consistent pattern of broken relationships. Now, this includes romantic relationships, friendships, professional relationships, and the key here is it's always the other person's fault. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes relationships end for legitimate reasons. That's normal. But when there's a pattern where every friendship implodes, every romantic relationship ends badly, every job ends in conflict, and the story is always, they were crazy, or they didn't get me, or they were jealous, that's a red flag. You see, low EQ often shows up as an inability to take perspective, to see your role in conflict, to understand how your behavior impacts others. I want you to picture someone who's had 5 romantic relationships in 3 years, and each one ended explosively. And the story is, they were too needy, or they didn't appreciate me, or they changed. But here's the thing, the common factor in all 5 relationships was them. And this lack of insight is probably the most damaging aspect of low EQ, because if you can't see your part, you cannot change it. So the pattern repeats again and again. Unfortunately, people with low EQ often feel lonely and misunderstood. They genuinely don't know why relationships keep failing, and without intervention, a lot of folks stay stuck in that cycle. Now, here's the most important part of this video, and that's the fact that low emotional intelligence is not a life sentence. It's not like a personality disorder or a neurodevelopmental condition. It's a skill defect, and skills can be learned. Research shows that EQ can improve with practice through things like therapy and self-reflection, even like feedback from people who you trust. Paying attention and getting curious about emotions can also help, and this includes both your emotions and that of others. Now, if you found this video interesting, I think you would like this video right here that breaks down how trauma affects the nervous system. On that video, I dig into 3 really important points and their neuropsychological reasons. I also want to make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Before you go, I have one request for you, and that is to leave a comment about the one sign of low emotional intelligence that you notice most in your day-to-day life. I respond to every single comment, so I'm looking forward to talking to you. My name is Dr. J, and this has been Mental Wealth MD, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.